and the right side. They're going to take the trash receptacles and move them to the far left of the picture area. The islands will be slightly raised to a certain height and will have downward-facing lights. They were careful about what type of lights to put on. They looked into solar, but were instead suggesting LED lights and, really trying to lower the light pollution in that area. Two-way traffic throughout, 109 spaces, if I didn't say that. And they think they'll be able to get someone to bid on the job for, around the $275,000 price range, although it has to go out to bid first to discover what the price is.
Can I ask,
Sure.
if you know how many spaces there are now? I mean, is there a net gain?
We had Mark go out and count the cars, and he says it's anywhere from 100 to 120 all over the place. Certainly not handicapped accessible or designated spots. He also said there is often not a flow of traffic able to get around if it is full with 120 cars. So the 109 is the two-way traffic throughout and with handicapped spots.
And the islands.
And the islands, yeah. Now, they've taken out the trees, which are currently an island of sorts, but they didn't feel that they were able to save those in the design. They really felt they needed to go, so there was a couple of trees involved. Questions, other questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Is the footprint here larger than the current footprint?
No, it's about the same
About
size.
the same.
Yeah.
In order to get a bigger footprint, the price tag would go up enormously because you would need to start dealing with the ledge, and then you would also lose some of the area to do the drainage. So this was really the best you could do with the kind of budget that we're looking at.
So my other question has to do with moving this disposal area back to this back corner, and particularly in the months when it gets very dark very early. And what is the lighting going to be, and is this going to present any safety issues for the individuals who are bringing things back here late at night?
It will be lit. There's definitely lighting to accommodate that area. It's actually, it's much easier for the trucks. Right now, the trucks can't actually get at where they are if there is parking. So this will allow the dump truck to come straight and back right up to the
I'm thinking
dumpster
more,
here.
though, of our staff who are working
Yeah,
to keep
Mark
our-
fully supports the idea here and
Yes.
vetted with his team. It's actually, it will be more accessible and it is lit for them, so.
Okay.
It's certainly further walk,
It is
but
farther
it is lit on those islands, and he felt that it was a better situation, actually.
But is that a sidewalk?
Yep, it is a
That's
sidewalk.
a little bit safer
Mm-hmm,
than what they have now.
yep.
Then the only other question I have is whether it was a one-way system was looked at, because the drivers that are coming out of this first area here, we have a lot of students coming out of here at the end of school and people trying to get in. I assume this is going to be wider
Yep,
than it is
it
currently.
is wider.
But it still seems like it's going to be a little bit tricky having two-way traffic on each one of these access points rather than having a one-way loop. Just wondering if a one-way loop was looked at or compared to the two-way.
Well, I think it's essentially supposed to be a one-way loop now, and people disobey it anyway. So, given that
Right.
people will do what they do, I think expanding it and at least providing for making it two-way seemed to be a better option than restricting the space and then having people try and go against the flow of
Okay, I
traffic.
see.
Ross Associates spent some time talking about that, and they definitely, having spent time in that parking lot, recommended the two-way throughout. But they had talked about it. I know they did.
Okay.
I don't think they felt that it really gained any parking spots.
I'm thinking more safety
Yeah.
than parking
They felt it
spots.
was safer,
Two-way
or whatever,
safety.
yep.
So this is now going to get vetted by, well, Rob was going to, they were going to do some initial checking of codes to make sure the lighting was appropriate for the schools being in a historical district. And the Board of Selectmen strongly felt that this is a presentation warrant article, because it's really town land. So it'll be co-presented by the Board of Selectmen and the schools, which is great to have their support for it. Whether or not it gets by CPIC, we will see. That's yet to be determined. But it's certainly been an item that's been on the books for a long time to get done. And if you drive down the Pond Road parking lot now, the difference between that and what that was, this would just be, it is so dangerous in this parking lot at night, and citizens walking through there, especially for voting or town meeting, anything in the dark.
A lot of meetings at night in
A lot of
that,
meetings.
in that school. Yeah, I think it will be a,
And actually, the drainage, so right now, there isn't anything catching the water that's going down and running off into the pond, essentially. There's no catch basin, so it's whatever is the runoff is the runoff. This will at least allow for some of the treatment of the water before it goes down. It'll catch some of that stuff and clean it out before it falls down into the
yeah, we talked with
watershed.
Rich Noda about the treatment of it as far as what runs off in the winter based on the salt and sand mixtures that they use in the roads. But his point was that's what they use currently in that parking lot, and there's no treatment of the water. And so again, it'll be better in that case than it is currently.
It's not actually going to get treated per se, but it will rest longer so that the salination will drop before it goes down, and then it will catch the sand before that runs down.
Yeah.
So.
The other development since this was written is that the new teacher for graphic design is using the CAD class again to draw, to make a mock-up of what that'll look like,
That's
which is
great.
really great.
Yay.
Is your son still in that class?
No,
No,
not this year.
not this year. Great. So going further into my report, I just wanted to thank the Harvard Schools Trust again. We could take a vote to accept those two amounts that hadn't been on the agenda because that letter came in later. But we had a speaker that the students had asked for, which was the Green Team, in the amount of $1,500, and also a teacher asked for $3,150 in order to host, I think, on the Common, that Civil War Living History event that had happened in a previous year. So those are for this group to consider.
Okay.
And then we had the public forum, which I had written here about. We had about 35 people attend. Nancy was there, and I thought it was a valuable dialogue between the school, the fire chief, police chief, but also the audience. And I thought they did enlighten us to several points, which included the importance of our communication, some anxiety that was created due to the uniforms and the increased activity and just the fact that it had happened, and also an interest in policy. So I've been researching a bit on that, and meanwhile, we secured the vendor, and they're actually putting the cameras in this week. So then I'll have to pull the policy group together because we'll need to work on a policy so that we can start to use them. And that is the end of that update, I think. Any
Were there-
questions?
There are people, I think, well, maybe you can reiterate, that's, part of it was about the interviewing of the students, and a request perhaps that parents be able to be attending with them, but I know our policy and school policy across the
Right.
nation is that the principals have the purview, and the police certainly do, to talk to students without parents being there. Where did that discussion sort of lead you, or?
Yeah, there were several points. One is that, I thought Chief Denmark made a great point that immediately some conversations were had with students who had been identified in the area in order to ensure that there wasn't imminent further danger.
Yeah.
So they felt it was the right thing for them to do some of the interviewing immediately. But what they realized is they had thought that because they have a relationship with the schools, that it wouldn't be a high-stress situation for the students. And even some of the students' affect was such that they didn't feel that it was a concern. But that was different when students went home and talked with their families. So one of the takeaways from that is that if it was determined that immediate interviews were needed, then a call home needed to happen before the child got home, and that didn't happen.
Got it.
They were too sure that there would be no ill effect, and so they didn't reach right out and make those phone calls, which on hindsight, they should have tasked someone to do.
Yeah.
Just so the parents were aware rather than hearing it first from their children. And then they both Jim and the chief said that later interviews did include the knowledge of parents, and that's how they prefer to do it. And they may have gone a little further than they would have if they were thinking about informing parents. They may have interviewed a few more kids than was needed on that day.
Got it.
So it was good. It was a good takeaway. It was important, too. I thought the two chiefs thought that one of their takeaways was being more proactively visible and around when there isn't something going wrong, to try to just be in the schools and be more available, so to lower anxiety in the case of something happening, which was a good point as well. So.
And I think what I heard parents say was that the anxiety was largely because of the fact that you had uniformed police officers in the room. If it was just our administrative staff who the students know and see there every day, that would have been one situation. But calling a 12-year-old girl into an office with 5 or 6
I
people,
think it was 7.
3 of whom could have been
Yeah, it was a lot
uniformed,
of
you know,
people that
could
they
be
walked into.
intimidating.
Mhm.
I did take a look at the Bromfield handbook, trying to find a policy that had to do with notifying the parents about, you know, in the case that the student would be interviewed. And I didn't find it easily, so if it's there, I need to spend more time. But it's good to hear we have one, because that was the other question I had coming out of the meeting was, you know, as indicated here, policy for the cameras
Mhm.
is definitely needed, they're new. But then, do we have a policy for questioning students? And if so, you know, as parents, we all should know what it says.
I'm not sure that Bromfield has it in their handbook, but there is legal precedence that says administration and police can interview students without parents.
So should we develop a policy that would be consistent with that, and so that parents will understand, because it seemed, you know, that some didn't have that information and didn't have that
Right.
expectation. So at least if we have a policy.
Yeah, if it's in the handbook, it's a guideline, not a policy, but we could put it
Okay.
in the handbook
Okay.
as a guideline, so that parents saw it. And it could just be a repeat of the statement that the HES added, which was to that effect.
Mhm.
It's a good idea.
You might want to look and see, I thought there was a policy about it, no? School committee policy, students' rights, no? Okay. All right,
Yeah.
then we should have one,
Yeah.
just so it's clear what our policy is.
So would you want a policy or the guideline in the handbook, or both?
I think there should be a policy.
A policy, and then it would go to the Bromfield School Council to decide whether it goes into the handbook? Is that how it would work?
So do you just want the policy to reiterate the law?
Yep.
Okay.
I think people should have the ability
No.
to know what the policy is, and then include it in however format you want with the handbook. If there are more language that you want to put behind it, that every attempt will be made, or whatever it is, but
Yep.
I think we should have it.
Okay.
Do we know the law?
Yeah, the law gives the principals the right to interview students without parental consent or notification even.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want, I mean, I know this is not the meeting to do this, but in what Linda was just saying was, that in the hindsight of the meeting and the things that were brought up, that they thought maybe they should have let parents know beforehand, and not invited them to come in, but.
They
so
thought
that
they should
didn't-
have told them before the child got home, but after the interviews. So they felt it was a time-sensitive reason to just have those. I mean, I think what I took from it is that if there was no reason to be sensitive to time, they would rather tell parents ahead of time and allow them to be present if that was appropriate. But in this instance, they did it right away, which they felt was the right decision. But they should have called the families to let them know they had done it. And that's what they didn't do.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that clears it up.
Okay, so you guys could take it under.
Yeah, my only follow-up on that is, are parents aware of these policies? I mean, are they distributed, or are they
Which
notified?
policies?
I mean, how would parents know that we have such a policy?
They would have read the handbook, and if there is something in
Okay,
the
so we're looking for
handbook-
both, a policy and then the
Yes.
guideline?
Yeah,
Okay,
I would put it in both.
okay.
But the policy will be broader, and the handbook allows for a little bit more explanation of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right,
Hand this to you, Susan Mary.
thanks.
And then the last point in my report was just that I think it's wonderful that service projects continue throughout the district, but one I noted was the idea of the third graders making cranberry bread and giving it to
That's great.
local food
It's a favorite.
distribution. Yep. It's a great project.
Great, thank you. All right.
See you later.
Thanks, Kenneth.
Bye, Kenneth. Thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Have a nice holiday.
You still have to get him a nameplate, right?
She ordered
Yeah,
it
I
already.
I don't know why it didn't come in yet. I gotta call and check because it should have.
All right. Are you able to present the trip, or I'm just thinking if there are ramifications to it not getting approved this evening, or can it be brought back at a future date?
It can be brought back at a next date.
December
It just
14th.
needs to be approved a year before it is to take place, and it's not to take place until February of 2017.
Okay, so
So we're still okay.
So I'll leave my attention off of that. which
Could
is
I
the-
make a comment on that?
Sure. Yeah.
That would help for next time.
Yeah.
I mean, my only thought on that was, since it's out of the country, given the current events in the world, what precautions would be taken for the students traveling internationally?
The administration always has the right to cancel a trip if they feel that the student's safety is in danger in any way, shape, or form. So I do think that for sure this tour company has presented in the past that they do take measures for that and looking for that, but I'm sure Bryce can speak to that a little bit more in full when she's here.
Right, good.
Yep.
There's always insurance, I remember discussions, they have trip insurance, so if the trip were to get canceled,
Yep.
people wouldn't be.
But, you know, hopefully it would go forward and not get canceled, but what, information are they going to share with the families about precautions that they'll take to help ensure that if the family makes a decision that the student will be going,
Yep.
that they'll be safe?
Great.
Hi, Kristen.
I'll have Bryce address that if she, when she comes back. Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Great, so now we're going to go, perfect, that Kirsten's here. Linda, the parking lot project preview, anything else that we should go over that wasn't
No.
in your report? Okay, great. So actually, Kirsten, we are running right up your alley here for the HCTV MOU review.
Okay,
Perfect timing.
ready. All right. So Stu and Corlia and I met on Sunday morning, just to have a conversation. This is something that 2 years had gone by March of 2015, and we are meant to look this over certainly before this year is up. And according to Corlia, HCTV is thrilled with their permanent space, and it's going really well. They're excited about kind of the slow but steady use of the space by the Bromfield students. They're hoping for more use of it, and they're open to that, but they understand that the process needs to be done properly, and teachers working with the students are coming from, the schools, and it's under the direction of Jim and Linda and all of they're happy, but they're hoping for more over the course of the next, couple of years. We talked about the MOU, specifically, talked about the purpose, the basic intent of it, and how they do feel like it has been a collaborative venture between the schools and them. And it does further support their mission statement, which is public education and government. And they're thrilled that the education piece is becoming more prominent within what they're doing. Let's see. The terms and conditions, I did talk with Coralia about E and F in the MOU, which talks about the cost of utilities and custodial care, and how, right now that's just included as part of them being there. And we did talk about F, where it says, if warranted, modify this agreement as it pertains to cost of utilities. So that's for us to talk about and decide as far as, what the expenses are, as far as we can know. And Linda was going to look into that with the air conditioning. And but there are certain things that I think are hard to kind of pull out, because they're just things that we do as part of maintaining, the building, and just keeping it clean and all of that stuff. As well as the utilities aren't separate except for the
Air
air conditioning, right?
Right, that's the only thing that's metered separately.
Yeah. But
That just went in when?
I think before last summer.
Oh, okay, all right. The meter also?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a self-contained unit.
Okay.
so, they're open to, hearing more about that. I did talk with Coralia and Stu about Chef Paul and the $5,000 that he contributes through the food program, and that was a possible consideration as far as what they might contribute. And then we talked about where it says procedures for review. It talks about a report, the annual report, where the school committee and HCTV collaborate to have a report. And I know that in the school committee annual report, we've had a little blurb sort of about the HCTV and the studio, and they as well have had something about the schools. But Coralia said that she's certainly open to, sitting down with me to come up with a report. If that's what this committee wants us to do and what HCTV wants her to do, we can do that as well.
Great.
Can I ask what Coralia's role is?
She is, I'm trying to think if she is an official member of the HCTV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and she started,
And she's the educational liaison for them.
I think it was in the spring, maybe,
Maybe that.
of this year.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Do we know what, if any, revenues were driven when they were here to the town? Were they just here and they've always had a free ride because it's the, town money is going towards sort of this great asset? Do we know if they provided any funding when
While
they
they
were
were in
here?
this building, do you know, Mary?
There was, I'm not sure if there was when they were here, but there was talk about them paying when they went to the Bromfield School.
Okay.
But I don't think that ever happened.
Yeah, and I did check in with Mark.
They have a budget.
He said that his people go down once a week. and, just do general cleanup. He says it isn't very highly used, so it isn't like they generate a lot of mess or whatever. So he didn't say it took a lot of time from his crew. And then in the summer, they do go down and strip the floors like they do everywhere else in the school. So it's just part of that routine. And snow removal. And then the metering, he said it would be very hard, even with the air conditioning on a separate meter, to exactly figure out what, what was going on with that. Trying to think of other places that we charge. Certainly Chef Paul, but then, his kitchen is cleaned every day thoroughly by the maintenance staff. Other places that use the building, like I was thinking of Bear Hill Rowing, for a long time they didn't pay to use the ergos in the school space, but we did do that fairly recently, and they pay about $800 a season. So we're collecting about $1,600 from Bear Hill Rowing for the use of the building throughout the year. So I don't know whether this group thinks the 5,000 is reasonable, too high, too low, just right. And I don't know what their profit margins are and where that profit goes, whether any should go back to the school for some of those
Well, they
kind of
have.
minor expenses or not.
So Bill Johnson was at the CPIC meeting this morning, and they have a $94,000 submission on the capital report, which will be fully funded from the charter revenues that they get. So they get revenues from charter cable company. That's the little line that you see on your charter bill is the tax thing or the fees. That goes to the cable committee, or at least some of it. So 94, they're upgrading, they're on an analog system where they are, so they're upgrading things to be digital and fiber optics, so that's a $94,000 expense. They are holding off on an additional about, I want to say 45, that could be a little off, but on cameras that will be going up into the town hall. To be upgraded. The other cameras, like in Volunteers Hall, and if anything stays here, will remain on the older system until they can get more funding to go along, but the cameras will be older. But up in Town Hall, they would like to put the new cameras in, but they don't know if the Board of Selectmen perhaps have money left over in the Town Hall budget. Should that be part of the Town Hall building budget, or should those cameras be purchased out of the charter subsidies? So there's money that they do get. Obviously, any money that we take will decrease their funding to do cable stuff. So, I'm not attached necessarily, but I think my question is, we offer a 1 credit course. Is that right, through the cable? Like Martha uses that room for 1 course that students can receive credit from.
Yes, I don't know how much credit they receive
That's
from that
fine.
course, but there is one course that doesn't use the studio every time they meet,
Okay.
but uses it at times, like it was the newscast that I showed
Saw.
here.
Okay.
That was produced in part down there, and then edited.
And then is there a club? Is there a video
There is
club?
not a current club.
Not a current club,
for
okay.
video.
Do you know that if there were plans, because I think the cable TV has a 10-year, cable committee has a 10-year plan. Are they hoping to,
They would love to capitalize on, especially after-school
yeah,
kinds of clubs and community ed. They've put out there a couple of times some possible people that could be doing that. I'll tell you what I think personally about the whole thing. I think just having the facility there is a great opportunity for our students. We haven't capitalized on it, but we're certainly heading in the right direction. And I think we have limited choices since we are such a small school, and this provides another opportunity for kids to stretch themselves in ways that we just haven't had until this came to our school. I think it's a great service for us. I think it's a win-win for us and for HCTV and for the town. And I would recommend that we just keep things as they are. They seem to be working really well. I know that when they do buy equipment, they keep our students in mind for some of the things that they have bought. Certainly, they use it for the town as well, but they keep our kids in mind when they're making some of these purchases as well. And that's huge. And it's money that we're not spending, directly from the schools.
What was Stu's take on things?
Very supportive of them being there and the current arrangement, and he feels that if it's working for the schools, that for him personally, he thinks it's great to just keep it as it is. So he was very supportive.
Okay.
However, he wasn't saying no to the numbers that I put out there either. He wasn't
Right.
saying that's ridiculous or whatever, So I think whatever our committee decides, he will support within that range.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions, if I may. So is HCTV considered a public entity or a private entity?
Public, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah,
public.
Public.
They're a public entity?
I think so.
Town of Harvard?
I
Kind
think
of.
So,
Cable, yeah.
yeah.
Steve, they have a budget, right?
You're going to have a budget this year for the first time.
Oh, this is the first year. I thought they already had.
I know currently they haven't put anything into
Right.
their requests for additional money for utilities or whatever. Doesn't mean that they won't if that's what we decide.
Okay.
Do you have more?
Well, yeah, I was a little bit confused, I guess, by this issue, and just wondering whether we had the authority to give public space in a school to an entity on a permanent basis, for one thing.
Well-
The way this is written, it's indicating that the committee would agree to provide on a permanent basis 1,700 square feet. I mean, that's a long time. If the school needs change over time, if the space becomes needed for a different school use, we've agreed to give it permanently to this entity.
Well, the term, this agreement is 10 years, and then it renews.
Under the space, it says the Harvard School Committee agrees to provide on a permanent basis approximately 1,700 square feet of space.
Do you think
That's-
that then the 10 years overrules the permanent, or do you think that the way
The
this is
initial
written is
term.
they get it forever, and now the terms
Oh,
of
it says the
agreement-
initial term will be 10 years.
Okay.
But what about under termination? Either party has a year. You need a year's notice in writing. So there is a,
I wonder if anybody legal checked this, or
Yeah, I
whether
think
it
that would be a
was-
good idea, to have this MOU reviewed by legal counsel. I think there are a few issues that it
I have a
raises.
couple too, but, I mean, I want you to go ahead with yours.
Well, I think, also, we're going to be agreeing that the cost of utilities will be absorbed into the operating budget of the school committee. It would be helpful to know, before being asked to vote on this, what those costs are.
And maybe the
They have
town should
been
pay
there a
them,
year, haven't they?
2 years.
too.
They've been there 2 years.
I mean,
Surplus.
I wonder if Corlia could sort of tease that out. Like,
What
if there's a-
part?
Utilities.
Well, here's
Our job to,
Mary was able to find this from August of 2014, and it says, Bill Johnson joined the meeting to give a summary of the movement of the cable studio from Old Town Library to the new studio at TBS, including plans for expansion of programs based on student interest. Bill Johnson is working with HEAC to determine the cost of the air conditioning usage at TBS and will make arrangements for reimbursement to the school department. Dr. Dwight indicated that demands on the school's IT department have been significant. Dr. Dwight agreed to step in as needed to ensure that school projects are not further delayed due to the increased workload.
so
So at that time,
So-
that was August.
perhaps someone
go,
on
thanks.
HEAC could assess the usage of that unit and say it draws a certain amount of electricity and that's our charges. I think it's hard because it's very hard to separate out our utility bills to isolate one area. And the prices fluctuate so much that you can't look back and say, oh, before this it was this and after this it's now this.
Right.
There's just
Right.
too much going on at the schools.
Right.
How would HEAC do that?
Well, every piece of equipment draws a certain amount of electricity. So if you can gauge how often it's running, you would be able to say it's drawing this many kilowatts per year, and that would equal a certain expense.
But we also should see an increase over the 2 years they've been there, if it was significant.
But see,
I
it's
would-
not
If it's
gonna be
not significant, then it's not significant, but,
I would think that would be really hard to do, considering conditions outside of the building change, which influence the energy. I don't know. I
Yeah,
would
Mark
think
thought it was going to be very difficult to do as well.
Over 2 years, I would think that would be hard.
What do you want HEAC to do? Because I am that liaison.
I don't know if they can do it. I mean, I can certainly ask someone over the break
Do
if it's
what,
possible to determine the electricity draw based on the type of equipment and
Okay.
usage levels, to get an annual.
And that
Operating
equipment
cost.
changes too.
Well, the equipment inside changes. The air conditioning probably draws the most
And that's
power.
separately metered.
And apparently that's separately metered, but it's difficult still to draw a cost on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hear both sides, because the tricky part too, from Kirsten's point, is our class of students uses that space for class.
Right.
So if they, if it's like Bear Hill Rowing and they pay us to use the space, which kind of purifies the relationship, then how do we pay back that our students are down there?
Right.
It's kind of a mingled up situation. We charged Bear Hill Rowing because we didn't want to show preference to them over HAA,
Right.
and we charged them. So we wanted to kind of purify all those relationships and say, if everyone else pays, they pay. This is a complicated, situation because of you want it more used. I mean, hopefully Martha's class is successful and another class runs and another class. Now, the problem too is staffing. Martha can fit in one class besides all the other classes she teaches.
Right.
We don't have another staff member that has open spaces to be able to do that. At one point in our budget, one of our extra asks had been a .5 teacher to do video, but that didn't get funded, and I'm not sure the administration would fund that above anything else, so it's, again, kind of difficult. And it'd be different maybe if they hired someone who could also teach and be accredited, but I'm not sure when they look for their station manager, they're also looking for a certified teacher. And therefore, it doesn't help us in class time. It could help for clubs or after school, but it doesn't help to offer it as a course unless it's a certified teacher.
but I guess the last question I had was on the space, and just hearing back from the administration that this is extra space, the health and wellness classes, and I'm pretty sure there's more than one health and wellness class, are kind of stuck in the back corner of a area on the lower level of Bromfield, down by the PTO storage room, and just set up with some temporary walls. I don't know if anybody's been down to see that space.
Yep, I've seen it.
So I guess just the question is, is this amount of space that we would be agreeing to?
Did you know, are you familiar with this space as far as
Yes.
what this space was like
This one?
before? Yeah.
Yes, I know it was a storage area for PTO and science materials, piles of rocks, and, yeah, I was down there
Okay. I
before
just
it was.
wanna make sure we know we're
I've been
not-
down there as a TV
Now it's
station, too.
nice.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And that other space could maybe be nice too if we made that a priority and put money into it.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it is a priority, but.
We'll have to get Keith back.
That's just,
Yeah.
that's just the other question, is
Yeah.
whether the school
Definitely.
considers it to be surplus space that's not needed for other school needs.
All right. Mary, questions?
Well, I think it's an excellent program happening, and I don't want to question any of it. It just would be good to have information to be able to sort of decide whether, it's no big deal. let's go us forward, and then, but what if it's more than we think? I don't know, it's just information, maybe information gathering. So my question is around the quarried people. And it says in there that if it's a single use, single time, they don't have to be quarried to be in the building, but I think they actually do, even if it's a one-time thing.
Are you talking about in here, it says
Yeah.
this?
Yeah,
In security,
it's on the last page, page 4.
and I'm not questioning anybody who would be in there, but I just want to make sure that, is, by law, I do think that people who are in the building where there are students, no matter if it's a one-time thing, I think they need to be quarried.
Well, I don't know about that, though, because if you have parents going in for a parent-teacher conference once a year, they're not quarried.
But there aren't students in there either.
Well,
That's
there were
why.
plenty of students when I was,
But they're not alone, they're not possibly alone with a student there and to talk to the teacher. I just think we should check it out.
no, I'm not arguing it, I just, I think that you need to put some parameters around it. So is it in the event that students are down there unsupervised, then any adult who going in needs to be quarried? So I think we have to have our policy.
We need to figure out, if there's a single-use, single-time person, are they going to be in there with kids?
They should
And
never
just-
be alone with our kids. Because they can't teach them. So Martha always has to be with them if they're in that space. But after school, I know I met with Bill about the whole idea of the fingerprinting and the Cori checks, and they actually are having their regular employees fingerprinted as well. So I think maybe we could say something about students, maybe, in that. Because this is agreement between
The Board of Selectmen
Board
and
of
the school
Selectmen and the
committee.
schools.
I think that it's not defined enough. I think I agree with what you're saying, is that we should know what our policy is for those people, and it should conform to whatever policies we currently have in place in the school district. And probably should be legally reviewed, because it probably wasn't, so they might have caught something like that.
And should, if that was done, I mean, the way that I see, like HCTV, I see that there are people, for example, when they have meetings, that go down there regularly
But
at 7 o'clock
In the morning.
in the in
Or
the
evening.
evening. So, I mean, if we're gonna get to that point, do we need to have hours? Because
Right.
there are people
I
that go in
mean-
there after school hours
Right.
that go regularly that wouldn't necessarily be quarried.
I don't think that's,
So,
I think it depends on the interaction with students.
Yeah.
And that's
school
what's defined.
hours during the day.
so I think that's what this was trying to say, but it wasn't clear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
okay.
Okay.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? Maureen, anything from your point of view? No? Okay. So it sounds like the takeaways are, just approach a member of HEAC and see if it is possible to get a kilowatt usage.
I'll do that.
Okay.
I'll be in touch with Brian.
That we should have this MOU reviewed by legal counsel, and maybe that's Stu's to take to the town council. And perhaps it's Naomi as well, from a student's perspective.
I can do that.
And then to reconvene about the utilities and have a more in-depth conversation about whether it's necessary to charge, how much to charge. Is it simply working the way that it is, and it would be better will to not charge? I don't think we've decided that, because I don't think we have enough information at this point.
I'm sorry, I think I have one more thing. The HCTV, I think, should be the one to take the lead on preparing this annual report. I don't think it's really clear who's preparing the report. It says that HCTV will collaborate with the school committee. I don't know if that means the committee now has the responsibility to prepare that report, or whether HCTV will prepare it, but
That could be
once
it.
it's agreed to be prepared, someone has to prepare it.
It's the eternal we.
Yes, that's right.
We keep us
That's
out.
right, exactly.
So that might be an amendment, Kirsten, also to that.
All right, so let's make sure I've got these. So Stu, MOU reviewed by town council.
Yeah.
Naomi, Linda, you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
check in with her.
Will that include the Corey?
Mm-hmm.
So that'll update the
Yeah,
Corey.
definitely.
I'll ask her about that.
Okay, so I'll ask, does Stu need to check on the quarry part or no?
No, I think that's our
Okay.
responsibility.
Okay, and then the writing of the report. Who is the "we"?
Well, we'd like HCTV to be the lead, and
Right.
we'll certainly provide them with input.
Yeah, and
As
she
needed.
said they have been writing a report, it's just they haven't been.
Yes,
working with us
collaborating
at
with
all.
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like to see the word permanent taken out under the space, and just keep the way you have it with the 5-year term, with the, what is it? 5-year, 3-year, 1 year, all those, various timeframes look fine.
So-
10 years, 5 years, 1 year.
So then can I ask a question? So let's say HEAC comes back and says it would be really difficult to
Then we have our
do that.
discussion. We say we
So-
can't tell, and so therefore, is it worthwhile pursuing a charge or not? I think that'll be a discussion that this committee will have to
So we're
have.
gonna wait for that part of the discussion until after we know what we know. Okay, I just
That's what
want to
I'm
make
hearing.
sure that I'm
Yeah.
clear with Stu and Corlia.
Great.
Okay.
Council may be able to also say whether there should be some type of nominal charge just to, again, not.
Make it equitable
Yes.
across the board.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
We could find that out.
great.
Thanks.
Anything else on the HCT MOU? Okay. Kirsten, thanks so much for
Yeah,
taking the
thank
time to
you.
do that. All right, next is the budget updates. Da-da-da. Linda and Mary have been hard at work.
All right, I'd like to pass out this page. There's a page behind it that doesn't really relate to what we're doing right now.
Want me to pass these around?
Sure, thanks.
Okay, sure.
Separated already. Might take
Okay.
And then
one
Kirsten,
sec.
can you,
Sure.
we've been asked to make sure we have our mic really next to us so we can be heard at home. Just move these in.
Have it on your screen, right?
No, she doesn't have
have
this one,
this?
actually.
I'll have them, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
So the last time we were all together, the.
We should charge for utilities. Apparently, we're not getting heat.
No heat.
Very true.
Can I have one?
Oh, sorry.
Not a
We
problem.
should have a tin can.
Sure.
Throw it in.
Like coffee fund. Last time that we all met about the budget, last Monday, the budget was at 3.54 increase. And after that, we really took some direction to try to see if there was any way to lower it underneath 3%, which is where it was last year, below 3%. So we went back to the cost centers after our meeting and produced new pages, and I wanted to tell you where the reductions were taken from. So in order to get the budget to be below 3%, we really needed to trim about $90,000. So where would we get the $90,000? We started to look at both offsets and where things could be reduced. So one of the places that the budget was up quite a bit was for the school maintenance, which was Mark's budget. So rather than identify for him, I went back to him and said, where could you cut $5,000, and would that be okay? And of course, he said yes. And he looked and found the places that are listed here on this extra sheet. So one of his asks was for a new computer for the HVAC system. Well, replacement computers can be purchased under Chris's budget, so he felt he could take it out of his budget, and if it ends up being needed and as an absolute, he had another place to be able to fund that from. The $500 was put in for tractor repairs, but that's also a CPIC ask for a new tractor. So he won't have to repair it if he is granted the new tractor, so it was a bit of a gamble, but he was willing to take that. $400 to replace cabinet locks could be put off. $180 was saved by purchasing 2 ladders instead of 4, and he lowered the sprinkler system quote from $4,500 down to $4,000, which he believes, he can work with a vendor on that. So that was where Mark was able to save us about $5,000. Jim's budget was also up, and so talked with him about certainly reducing an area that we helped identify, which was the graphing calculators. Instead of getting absolutely everyone, could we put that into a 2-year spread? And so he reduced that by a half, and that saved us $5,000. Also looking more carefully at what we put into the Shaw Trust offset last year. We're still below it by putting in the exercise equipment that'll go into the room for the personal fitness classes that are now held at the school. So that's where the 8445 comes from. So that was Jim's budget. If I'm going too fast, just slow me down. But I'll go on to Hildreth. Hildreth, when we took away one of the kindergarten teachers, we took the 2 aides that support that classroom. They're 4-hour aides, so that each of the classrooms has 4 hours plus 4 hours, which gives them a full day coverage. When we put the new teacher in, we did not put the 2 aides back in. So they've actually been short 2 aides this year in the class configuration that they have. We had put those 2 back in for next year, but again, trying to cut the 90,000, we asked her to put 1 back in and not the other. And ways that we may be able to take care of that situation would be she has the option of putting all of the half-day students in 1 class, and then 1 class wouldn't need the afternoon aid as much. So there's ways to make that work out pretty well for the students. Technology, we are looking to move into more lease programs, certainly next year by adding 7th and 8th grade as we're requesting. So talked with Chris about reducing the replacement ask from 70 units of desktops and laptops down to 50, so that we're looking to lease equipment more than have it on the 5-year cycle. So that was $20,000 estimated saving there. And then to make up, again, to get to 90,000, one of the other budgets that was up was pupil services, particularly in the area of tuitions. And that was both in out-of-district tuitions and in the case collaborative tuitions. So we could use more of the circuit breaker and offset her budget by more to take into account those higher tuitions that are happening. And so that would be an additional $40,000. If we do all of that, then if you look inside your budget book on tab 3, all of the pages in here have been updated. And so that now our ask to the Finance Committee, if this moves forward as it is set, would be a 2.7, which is below the 3.5 that we had last time we were together.
And this still gives you what you need?
We believe so. There was an equal amount, not an equal amount, but there was both the trimming and the increase of the offsets, which is a helpful way for it to happen versus trim 90,000 straight out. Because small parts of the budget, it takes a lot of those small parts in order to reach 90,000. as we saw. So this page that I gave out extra is not in your book. You might want to tuck it in your front section just so that you can see what was changed.
I have a silly question.
Sure.
So what's in the cabinets?
I never asked him. I know what room number it was, but
$400 in the event it disappears.
Not really sure.
Okay.
The pages now in your book that have been filled in are the new table of contents. Tab 1 is the latest updates on the district improvement plan and our goals. Kind of to keep that at the forefront of what we're doing, just to make sure our decisions are based on that. Number 2 is the enrollment, which again focuses on the students. Section 3 is the summary. If you're satisfied with what we've done with these newest and latest cuts and the pages after, I would also write a summary, which has been in the other books, but just isn't done yet because we don't know if this is final. Then if you keep going, we have the subsidies, which has been updated. We were thinking of putting another page after this, which really details the expenses on a separate form. So for instance, Shaw Trust, what is being offset by that $24,000? We can be very specific about that. It's on the budget pages, but it might be nice to have that as backup to just the subsidies. Same with the Devon's offsets. That could be more fully described, and we can work on that. That shows you how the subsidies have gone up or down. School choice went down by 45,000, but circuit breaker went up by 60. We can also, we were talking about having a page that goes in this section that talks about what's in those revolving accounts. So how much is left in the school choice? How much is left in transportation and in tuitions, which are some of the revolving accounts we have besides Devon's. So then the budget worksheets have been redone as well to match the changes. So Section 5 is central office. Section 6 is Mark's budget with the new figures. 7 is Sue's budget. And so on. 8 is Jim's budget. At the end of Jim's budget is the athletic budget, which was not in prior to tonight. So that's a change. We'll be talking about that in a little while. Marie's budget worksheet is updated, as well as Chris's. If you take a look at Chris's, I'm now under tab 10, and you look at his final page, it is now the recommendation of the administration, after very careful thoughts about our capacity, is to move forward with staff MacBooks and 8th grade MacBooks, but to delay on 9 through 12 until we can get more information about how MacBooks are working, and also just that much equipment to manage it with the current staff that we have really requires us to be a little
So the
little
8th grade,
slower.
you're doing MacBooks, not iPads.
right.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. Okay, great.
That'll give us a year with a different technology, which will be helpful to really see the difference and determine how successful that platform is with us, for us. So that's gone down. It was a little over 300,000. Now it's down to 171. Doesn't impact the budget specifically, because if it happens, it'll be a complete offset by Devon's technology.
So may I ask then,
Sure, please.
are we going to be presenting this budget with the offsets?
Always is presented that way, yes. Yep.
We could, if members need more time to digest the technology, that could certainly come out of the approval that the school committee does of the budget, with that to be included later on. So if people feel they needed Linda to come back and review whatever changes she made with technology, as she said, that's independent because it's Devon's funded. So, but once we approve this, if that's part of it, then we've approved the technology purchases essentially. So we can
And
just
certainly
be
Paige can
clear
come
about
out.
how that goes when
Yeah.
we approve it on the 14th.
For the first time, if you look at tab 11, we've asked Chef Paul to be specific, even though his is like the athletic funds, in that it's self-funded.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that piece. Would you mind
Sure.
explaining that, what that $5,000 is, or where it comes from?
the $5,000.
Is that what you're referring
No,
to?
I'm referring to tab 11.
Tab
Tab 11 is his complete budget,
Okay,
which does reference the $5,000 that he pays a subsidy to the district. It's on the first page there. 5,000, right there. But he has never detailed his budget, or at least not in recent years. He may have in the past, but, what he pays his workers, what is paid for food, who are his vendors, what does he, because it is, his employees are our employees, even though it's self-funding. It's very much like the athletics. The coaches are still our employees, even though that program is self-funding. So the revenues he receives are also on here, and then, just more detail, more specifics about who he has working for them, what they're making per hour.
Yeah, and just to give some history on it, there have been years, probably 3 years ago, where it looked like the food service was going to be operating at a huge deficit. So this is really just giving us more tools to manage this on a more continuous basis.
The other thing to make this group aware of is, if you look at the final page of his budget, he relies on about $30,000 from federal and state revenue. And in order to receive that, it's similar to some oversights of the public school. There are things we have to do in order to receive funding. There are things that his food service operation is to do in order to receive funding. And he will tell you those are very restrictive situations, and don't allow for some of the flexibility he has needed in order to make his program successful. So, for instance, his breakfast offerings would need to be different. His vending machines would need to be very different. His a la carte would need to be very different. And so far, he's been able to attend trainings and work within the system, but he does see that in order to keep the quality and the type of program he gives to our school, he may have to deny that funding in future years. So he may have to increase, or, one thing he may come to is this group to say, which part of his program could we help subsidize in order for him to take that $30,000, or would we want parents to have the higher cost of the food in order to have the program the way it is? So those are things that this group will have to wrestle with in the future. One way to consider it is, would his salary or part of his salary come into the omnibus budget? It doesn't currently come in. But that's what we did in athletics, is at some point, Pam Alexander's salary was brought in order to not burden the user fees quite as heavily. So I just tell you that ahead, because this 17 may be the final year he's able to still work around the system. He works it correctly, but it's tenuous for him right now.
And what's the SLX functions and the functions? Or what are those two things?
Those are his doing outside functions. So, if in his contract is that he can do these outside functions. So I don't know whether we're talking about the Harvard's market, or we're talking about the Harvard Schools Trust dinner he's done in the past, or anything like that.
So any catering function?
Catering functions, yep.
provides
Yep.
for revenue to go to
Yep.
the school. Okay.
And then he and his people are paid and use the kitchen as their, so there's a kickback to the program as well as the use of the facilities and his materials while he's doing those functions. So it's kind of a benefit to both.
Okay.
And we never have in the past had him come to present, or the budgets that are following this, but that certainly he and Pam and the other budgets could do that. Because under tab 12, you'll see we have community education. And one to be added, which wasn't quite ready, is the bridges, which is a bit separate from the community ed. And that one, we just had some final tweaks to finish on that. Because I just thought, if we're going to be transparent about athletics, we should be transparent about all the programs that we fund, well, not fund so much as run. Under tab 13, we've left that blank. That's the section where we'll put our additional asks,
Okay.
which may have something to do with the user fees from tonight and anything else that we come up with for that section. It's also where we can talk about Lorraine's position, what we decide to do with that moving forward. Tab 14 is the hourly pay grid and also the steps and columns of the teachers. One of, I think, important points to the public and also to FinCom is 1.5% is if someone was at the bottom corner, there's 1.5%. But every other is a downward step or a column over and the 1.5%. So it's can be kind of confusing. But it definitely turns out to be more than the 1.5 over and across. And then the last page, 15, wasn't in a prior book, but we thought it should be, and that is the capital requests all the way out to year FY21.
Great. Well, it's like doing 2 budget books in 2 weeks, right?
It's all good. We took your old pages out and put all the new ones
Just
in.
ask us anything, we know everything.
How many Post-it notes are they
How many
used by the
coffee do
Brown
they serve at the lunchroom?
All right, so people have any questions? We are not approving the budget this evening, and the chair of the finance committee has given our blessing to make sure we have all this straight. We are gonna have a conversation about user fees in a minute.
So that's not in here right now.
The user fee ask is not in here. This assumes that we go forward, basically actually with a deficit in user fees, if this is the way that this goes forward, because there will not be enough money collected from the athletic fees, at least, to cover the athletic budget. So we have to have a decision to be made about that, and that'll be part of our ask, I believe. So, but aside from that, people certainly ask questions about the budget now, and we will bring it back again for a final vote on December 14th. And any questions that you have now about maybe how to understand or what to do, or would be the way to go. So Kirsten, any questions at this point?
No, I'm thinking about what you said earlier about technology.
Yep.
And how that doesn't necessarily have to be part of this budget. And I'm trying to, I like that idea because I feel like I don't know enough about it, but at the same time I'm sitting here saying, how can I learn more about it so that, a month from now, I'll be more informed and more able to talk about it. So I guess maybe that's what I'd like to be able to figure out, is where can we potentially get more information, learn more about how this would work.
Were you at our meeting when Linda went over the technology plan, or was that?
I was here, I
Okay.
believe, yeah.
So-
I'd be happy to give answers to specific questions out to the whole group. I can have Chris come to the next meeting.
I guess I'm thinking of more like on a teaching and learning level, is like, what will this ultimately do for the kids?
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
clear about it.
I can give a limited answer to that. I mean, our hope is really to go advance on that SAMR model. So I think the whole idea will be to get away from substituting whatever's done with technology with what could happen with paper and pencil. And the idea would be to move towards some project-based learning. So that whole idea of the global connections and the projects that I was able to see at the conference, is what we're moving towards. You know, how can we connect on a STEM project with a class in Russia, or and there are those definite connections already out there. So it's not like we have to create those connections. We just have to tap into them. And so that's what we're hoping to move towards, is more of that project-based learning with authentic problems. I think our UN is already a great example of that, how the students are very connected in solving world problems, you know, on a
Yeah, and I
bigger
guess,
scale.
yeah, and I get that part of it, because we're actually doing a lot of that in my school.
Awesome.
Um,
We'll come visit.
But it takes, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of time and buy-in and at the classroom level, and
Yeah.
I guess maybe
Yeah, well.
I want to
Jen-
learn more about how that would
Yeah.
be rolled out, and how teachers would be given time to develop that stuff and make those connections and whatever.
Yeah, well, we're realizing that time and opportunity is important to moving things forward, and an interest. So we met with the different departments, and every one of the departments was interested in moving forward. You know, math had examples that they have already been doing, but they've been demonstrating it on one projected example versus having the students be able to experience it. So they already had uses. Certainly the writing and the feedback using Google Suite or whatever else they use for feedback. But the time and the opportunity to go and see it in action is one of the reasons we're slowing it down a little bit. Is, you know, 8th grade and 7th grade already has a high interest in moving forward in this direction. And so we can send them and have them expand their knowledge, and then have the upper grades be able to tap into that as a resource in a way to move things forward. We have the person who will be coming back next year, who has availability in her schedule to help with the curriculum connection. And what we did keep in this budget too is the stipended positions, because we're finding that having the staff members be paid just a little bit extra and an expert is paying out huge, because then they have a reason for people to come to them and ask them more questions. So I think it's going to be slow to evolve. I won't say that it's going to just all take off at once, but if there's pockets of its use, and right now there's some use with people bringing their own devices, but that again, there's those that have, those that don't have. I just see it's probably, in my time of education, the biggest possible change agent to what could happen to students' experiences in school than anything else. And it's generated by the teacher's interest, not from administration, because that is also not going to make it successful. So pretty excited about it. But being thoughtful and careful and putting the right amount of money into the professional development and the planning will make a big difference. So,
Thanks.
till it happens, we won't know all the ways it will happen.
Yeah. I feel better knowing that it's been slowed down some, and it's, you know, something that can come kind of from the ground up, as far as teachers helping teachers and
Mhm.
getting excited about what they see happening within the classroom.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the idea, get the, like the iPads, we got them in the teachers' hands first, and that allowed for them to hit the ground running, I think, with the 5th grade iPad. So now it's called Get the MacBooks, and the teacher, we're keeping the teachers getting the MacBooks to be able to get ahead of the curve and see, get used to the different ways you could apply stuff. So that's kind of how it happened, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been able to predict the uses necessarily with the iPad where that went, but the commitment of moving the education experience forward, it went hand in hand. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary, questions at this point?
I don't.
A lot to take in.
Yeah, I'd like to, you know, take it home and
Okay.
digest it.
Okay,
I
great.
probably have some.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks.
Yeah, certainly, send questions as you're looking at it to me, and then I can
Okay.
send the answers to Susan Mary, or however you want me to
Okay.
communicate it back.
Okay.
Great.
Maureen?
Even more so for me, because I wasn't at the meeting
Yeah, you
last
weren't
week, so I
there,
have lots
right.
to digest, but I know from past years, the process being the same, the book, it's worked really, really well in terms of having all the details. So
Okay, great.
really getting into it.
Nancy?
So, my question has to do with, I am struggling a little trying to understand the school choice component of the budget. So we agreed on 5 students added in, and not, I don't have a question about the existing students. It's about the ones that we agreed to add in. So I thought what I understood last week was that the students are chosen by lottery.
Yes.
So is that by grade? Because we have been looking at this chart of where we have some opportunities to fit students.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, if we would like to, as you had suggested, I think, at one meeting, accept 4 new students for 5th grade, is that even possible with the lottery that you can select them by grade?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
you can?
it goes on the
Okay.
website, there's an application, or parents call and get the application. The application identifies what the grade they're applying for, and then we always have more applicants than what we have spaces, so the first priority is to siblings. If there is a sibling in that offered grade already in our system, that slot is filled with the sibling. That's the
So-
only preference.
And if there
So
are
what if
more
a
than-
family has 2 or 3 children and wants them all to come to Harvard?
Yep.
Do we have to take it as a family?
No. So
As an
even now.
individual student?
Yep, even now, let's say,
Okay,
we have a family that has 2 of their 3 children here. They're hoping to get the 3rd one in, but unless a slot comes open in the grade that child is in, that will never happen.
I see.
And they have to take that. It is a misunderstanding quite often. Parents believe that if they get one in, that it's an automatic that the younger siblings will get in, but
I
it
see.
doesn't work that way.
And then the students, once they start coming to this district, are they grandfathered and then they can, they
Yes.
can continue to come to the district
Yep.
as long as they want through graduation? Okay.
In fact, there's one policy that we got a little bit caught up in that needs to be tightened in that it says once they come here, they are able to continue here and graduate here, but it never mentions if they move out in the in-between. And we had a family that wanted them
Okay.
back in.
Okay.
And so we need language around that.
Okay. The town employees, are we allowed to give preferential treatment if we have a teacher, like the child to come to the same school that the teacher's teaching at? We're not?
Not
allowed to
unless you
do
put
that?
it in your contract. And if you put
Okay.
it in your contract, you then can't collect the tuition from that town. So they, in a sense, are in at no benefit
I
to the
see.
district, but it's a benefit to the teachers in their contract.
I see.
So
It's not considered school choice.
it is
Right.
not considered school
Just a
choice.
perk.
Right,
It's just an extra student. Yeah.
right.
And quite a number of districts do that because it does lead to teacher retention.
I see.
It is less likely they'll leave if their children are in the system.
But we don't have that category right now.
We do not.
Okay.
And isn't it if you have that category, you eliminate the school choice category as the new students coming in? You'd have
I think
either
you can
one or
have
the other.
both. Some have both.
Okay.
Yeah. But I was actually talking to my mentor about that today. She said you really need to be careful, if we ever did that, about the language.
Right,
And
what if the teacher leaves the district?
Right.
Is the child allowed to stay?
I see.
also, you can put in language, she said you'd have to legally check it now, but when she was a superintendent, about it needs to be an average cost of other children versus it suddenly being a out-of-district placement that is then on the district, that cost, the child would need to not be enrolled in our district. Do you know what I mean by that? In order for those costs to go back to the original district. So there's just language to work out in case something, the needs of the student couldn't be met
Got
here.
it, got it.
But the first one you pick out of the hat, or whatever it is, that fits our fourth grade, or whatever our grade is that we want, that we're looking for a student, that's the student that will come into the
Yep.
district.
We call
basically.
them, and we have recently put in that they have a certain amount of time to decide back to come,
Mhm.
because there's always a list of people behind them
I see.
waiting for that slot.
No, no, Kirsten, you brought up last time about the cost, relative to technology and that kind of, it's really not clear to me whether there's, how the costs compared in terms of the revenue coming in and the amount that could be going out per individual. That part is a little difficult for me to
Yep.
try to figure out what I'm approving. Is it
It's definitely why we have.
revenue coming in, or is there just as much expense going out?
Yeah,
So-
well, the state has figured out it's over $16,000 to educate a student in Harvard. Choice is 5,000.
14.
No, it's
Oh, it was
over
last year, it was
16,
14,
yeah.
691, right.
Um,
This year, 16.
So most places do not think that it's kept pace because it's at its original amount. But what from studying a little bit, what the government is concerned about is places that are losing students at a rapid rate also have to pay that out. And so it can be a heavy impact to a district where parents are seeking to have their children in other districts. So they're sensitive to that. If it would go up to $15,000, a district could lose a lot of money if they're not, and they're
Sending this-
probably already struggling.
Right, got
And
it.
so, how does the system compensate them from losing that money? It's a tough situation.
It is. I mean, I think, I forget whose year it was when you first came on that we had, it was the school choice conversation in the first meeting. And it was just, it is a very complex, very emotional issue at times. I can't remember the number of hours that we spent on just deciding which slots and how many and the rationale. And then you look at a year when you have 17 choice students graduating in about 3 years from now, 4 years from now. That's a huge loss in revenue with none replaced, but on the other hand, I do think that there was a sort of a philosophical agreement around the table probably 4 or 5 years ago that with the Devon's funds, you could decrease your dependence on the school choice students. So it's always a rich conversation.
It's only a huge loss if you're not paying out as much for expenses servicing those students.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it works in your favor, and sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
So you can't really
Right.
determine.
With all our new technology.
Right,
it's
exactly. We're a
definitely-
good place to come. All right, so any other questions for you, Nancy?
No, thank you.
Well, no, okay. All right, so please take these home, review them. Please, we do need to approve the budget at the next meeting. So Kristen, does that answer for you concerns about technology? You'd be okay approving it, or are you asking for more or to wait on the, so Linda knows if she needs to
So I
come
just
prepared?
need to, I mean, that helped,
Okay,
and I just need to think of
Okay.
more questions, and I'll
Great.
make sure I ask Linda.
perfect. Great, thank you. All right, so that'll lead us right into the user fee discussion. So one of the handouts that you got with Linda's budget handout is a tuition scale for kindergarten, so just put that aside for that. I spent a bit of time over the last week putting together some figures for us to look at in all three areas of the user fees that have been brought up in the past. So,
Thank you.
Yep. I'm just going to walk you through this because you didn't have a chance to see it beforehand. What I did is break it down into the athletics category, the transportation, and full-day kindergarten, all, and then recap it at the bottom, trying to give you a comparison to what is so right now, perhaps some of the surrounding areas similar, and then what I think our ask would be to compensate maybe fairly or however we could make a dent in each area. So under athletics, Currently, students are charged between $260 and $395 to participate in sports with no cap, for an average of $320 per student per sport. Families with 2 children in grades 7 through 12 who participate in 2 sports a year will pay on average $14.50 for the year. The cost of including the coaches' salaries and stipends in the school's operating budget would be $124,000. If we did that, that would allow us to reduce the user fees to $225 per sport across the board, no difference between any of the sports, just one flat fee, which is more in line with Acton's 205, Groton's 300, Littleton's 200, Neshoba Regional is 150. And if we did that, that would allow us to keep the user fees for at least 3 to 5 years at $225. So that is the ask that the Athletic Advisory Committee, and Linda supported that as well. It is it's basically going back to where we were before the budget cuts really hit severely in the 90s, and including the coaches' stipends and salaries in the budget, operating budget. So that's an ask of 124. Under transportation, right now, students in grades K through 5 who live more than 2 miles from school ride the bus without charge. All other students, actually, you know what, I think that's K through 6, right, Mary? K through 6 do not get charged. I think this is where we,
K through 6.
K through 6.
If they're
yeah, within 2 miles, do not
outside
pay.
outside of 2 miles. don't
So
get
all other students,
Yeah, please.
if they're within 2 miles, K through 6, and everyone 6, 7 through 12, they pay $225 to ride the bus with a family cap of $600. Harvard's bus fee is similar to surrounding towns. Littleton is $225 with a cap of $675. Lexington is $300. Chelmsford is $200. Westford is $225. There are some towns across the state that do not charge bus fees. Included in that are Acton, Boxborough, Neshoba Regional, Concord, Carlisle. At least with Acton, Boxborough, I know that they actually own the buses. So they went the route of let's bring the transportation in-house. They don't contract with a bus company to do it, so they own the buses and they pay the drivers. If we eliminated the bus fee altogether, that would cost $60,000. That's about what we take in with bus fees.
Is it possible that regionals don't pay bus fees?
It could be.
I think that may have been an advantage to
Foxborough.
regionalizing.
All right, so maybe that's why
Yeah.
they don't pay. But I do know that some of the places have also bought their own buses. What I looked at is a partial reduction. So if we eliminate it for K through 5, so all K through 5 students could ride the bus for free regardless of where they live, that would be an ask of $12,375. There's a nominal ad, because it is K through 6 right now, that don't pay if they live outside the 2 mile range. If you added the 6th grade also, it would be an additional $2,700, but we'd have to make that determination whether it's just Hildreth or Bromfield and Hildreth K through 6. So that would be a potential ask of 12 or 15. The other area we were asked to consider was full-day kindergarten. So Harvard charges $37.50 for its full-day kindergarten program. It's actually lower than the nearby towns. So Groton's $47.90, Littleton is $4,057, Acton is $4,300. And there are some districts across the state that do not charge a kindergarten fee. With an average enrollment of 60 students, this equals approximately $250,000 in revenues. The Devon students pay the average per pupil cost, and some students qualify for a lower fee due to their income status, which that's the handout that you had from Linda, and then some families opt out and pay nothing for a half-day program. So if you eliminated the kindergarten tuition, that would be at a cost of $250,000. I didn't really go down the route of lowering the kindergarten tuition because it's already sort of on a sliding scale based on people's income. It's already lower than the surrounding areas, so I just didn't go down that route. So the bottom line is, on the fees, this assumes 2 kids playing 2 sports, or 2 kids riding the bus, or 2 kids in kindergarten. The annual cost is there, $14.50 for the athletics, $500 for the bus, $37.50 for kindergarten. Your total cost, if those 2 kids went through our entire system at current rates, would be $8,700 for athletics, $6,500 for the bus, and $7,500 for kindergarten. And if we eliminated it altogether, it's $240 for the athletics, $60,000 for the bus, and actually that should be $250,000 for kindergarten, not 200. Sorry about that. If we ask for a reduction per the guidelines above, we'd ask for $124,000 for athletics, $15,000 for the bus, and I didn't estimate a reduction in kindergarten, so I think it would either be the full ask or nothing.
And the 15 includes the 6th grade.
15 includes 6th graders, yeah, thanks.
So that could change if you wanted to.
So there you have as much information as I had time to gather, and much information as I think I could kind of put my head around. But I think we need to make some decisions about what the ask will be for the user fees. It can certainly wait for a vote on the 14th, but I'd like to get people's input if they need more information, or even a vote if people are ready to do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for putting this together. I think it's very helpful.
Welcome.
A little bit surprised on the bus fees, because I thought we ran the same buses all around the town for each of the schools. So in other words, you have the same bus routes, whether they're younger children or older children. We have, 6 buses, 5 buses?
7.
7 buses, and they each have a route around town, so they'll take some children and distribute them. So, but you only have about 1/4 of the cost, of the total cost. Rather, I would have expected it would be half the cost, because you would be taking one school.
Yeah, but everyone in
Most
7 through
7.
12 pays, even if they live
Within the 2 miles.
within the 2 miles. So the only ones who get it free within the 2 miles
I
are grades
see.
K to 6.
And is that something that the school committee decided a long time ago to break it down like that? Or is
No,
that
it's law.
state?
That's
It
state,
is a
that's
state.
Oh, so this should say all other students being 7 through 12, not K through 12, pay $225 to ride the bus with a family cap of $600? Is that what it is?
Well, students K through 6 who live more than 2 miles go free.
Okay,
Everybody else pays.
all right, I
So
see.
K through 6
Okay.
within 2 miles.
I
So
see.
I pay for the bus because my kids are within 2 miles, and they're.
I do not pay for the bus because my kids are outside 2 miles, but I will when they
you
get
hit
to
7th
7th grade.
I see, okay.
So,
So more
You-
families are paying in the upper grades,
I
for
see,
sure.
okay.
so you
thank
could structure you could change the bus fee differently. That's just the way that I did it. I mean, with no one really sort of
I see.
else advocating for something, I took that approach. That it also, from a traffic perspective, if you could get the traffic off the road at the elementary drop-off, I think that would be huge.
Or even the center of town?
Center of town. I think also, these are our kids that we want, the safest, and riding the bus is the safest route to school. Buses are designed to be big boxes that are safe. So my rationale was do something on the lower end, especially if we're not going to eliminate kindergarten, perhaps the lower bus fee, free bus for everybody K through 5, K through 6. But I'm open to whatever approach people want to take.
I've always hated this. I think this was here before I came on school committee. I can't remember how many years it's been.
It's been a while.
Um,
Since 2006, I would say.
Okay, yeah, so I didn't come on till 2009. And I don't get it. I totally don't get it, that parents would be expected to pay to get their students to school. If we don't get them to school, we can't teach them. I think there's an assumption here, and there's an unfair burden on working parents that don't necessarily have the time to get their kids to school. I'm one of those. I happen to live up the street, and Joey's old enough that he can walk safely to school from where I live. I think it puts an unfair burden on a certain part of our population. Not every family has the luxury of being able to drive their children to school. I really, really do not like the whole concept that we're asking families to pay to get their children to school. And I will have a very hard time, there's irony in this 225 number, because that's also the number to pay for athletics, which are happening after school. I have a hard time with reducing athletic user fees and keeping transportation fees still in place. I don't personally get it. So that's just how I feel about, I feel really strongly about it, and that's why I'm saying it strongly.
So Kirsten, you would look for transportation to provide it free for everybody, not just the K through 6?
Yeah, if you go to
So do we have a
Bromfield
cost?
or
Oh, that'd be
Harvard
the 60,000 then.
the elementary school, then you have a way for your child to get there, available to you. Okay.
Do I dare bring it up? But I guess in our Devon's contract, we pay for transportation for our kids, or, you know, we've tried to bring the tuition cost per student to be equivalent to services and whatnot, so that issue might come up and could affect the budget if that change were made. There might in the future be, you know, a negotiation to no longer have Devon's pay for a bus, because that's a service provided by the district to students.
It wouldn't
So-
change
and
for
you're-
the foreseeable contract, because that's
Very
negotiated.
true.
But
Very true.
obviously, if something changes on this end, that would be a point to be negotiated, absolutely.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear about it. So parent, or the district through taxes or whatever is paying for transportation with
That's
Devon. So
development.
parents
Yeah.
aren't paying an additional fee.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for you?
Just thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, I know it took a lot of time.
Okay. Mary?
I mean, I agree with Kirsten in that it doesn't seem right to charge families for buses, but, I mean, when my family was living in Newton, it was free, and then the next year, they charged, and I think it just became a budgetary thing, that budgets couldn't handle, either they weren't getting subsidized by the state anymore,
Right.
the state pulled their funding. I mean, I don't think that the schools did pay for transportation. I think the state did. And then they took that funding away, and they created that 2-mile radius, and everybody inside of that radius paid, because they figured that they could get to school by walking there and have crossing guards, which Newton did, but we don't. So I think that's why it's really unpalatable. There's no way that children within 2 miles can walk to school safely in this town. And I think that's what their idea was, in a way, that they could get there on their own without paying. But I do think, you know, if we are going to back our vision statement and have a balance of curriculum and extra, and given the state of the athletic budget, it won't be able to continue if we don't do something about it this year or next. I do think it's hard to compare the two, but I do think athletics is important to our districts.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
But if we don't do anything, I mean, the program cannot continue with the current makeup of using user fees to pay the stipends. So, you know, I don't know what what happen if we don't actually ask for this reduction? I think we're in danger of losing our program, which, would affect more than just sports. It would affect a lot of our families and how they feel about school.
And my question for that would be, if families continue to pay what they're currently paying, so it's not being reduced, but they pay what they're currently paying, then what would we have to put in to augment that? So rather than reducing to families, if we're not able to reduce transportation in a significant way or eliminate it entirely, then if we kept things as they are, what would we have to put in to make it work?
About 12,000.
So that's very different than what's being asked for. So I guess that's where in my head I would go as we look at the transportation fees. Something in between that.
So question, I mean, are we
Yes, so
looking
hang on.
at?
So, and Mary, anything else for you at this point?
I do feel like the coaches, I do feel like their salaries for doing what they do should be a part of the operating budget and not be funded by the students' families. And so there's still going to be user fees, and, they're coming down a lot if you're a $400 sport, not so much if you're a $260, but at least those user fees are gonna go, towards, everything else, the bus fees to get to games, the officials need to be paid, the refs need to be paid, and uniforms
Yeah.
are in there.
But let me just correct that. It's 11,000 this year that will be in a deficit. It's 22,000 next year. So it's 22,000 we'd have to
In order to keep things the same.
keep it the same.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Anything else? I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to contribute. Nancy?
My question was whether we're being asked to look at these in the alternative, or whether could we present both or all three. We're going to be presenting these as in the section that's blank in the notebook
13,
now,
yeah.
right? As the additional proposals.
Right.
So could we present, as Susan Mary has set it out here, with the athletics going down to the 225 and the salaries and stipends in the budget and the transportation coming off, eliminating, and I'm not quite sure what the conversation is on kindergarten yet, but in other words, do we need to choose between these options, or can we present 2 or 3 options? And if we do have to, if we are going to put in more than one, do we have to prioritize, or can we just present them equally to the finance group?
We would need to prioritize them, because they are more likely than not going to evaluate each one separately, but we would have in the past been asked to prioritize every additional ask that we provide for them.
And that will definitely bring us closer to the 3.5% that was originally the budget. Which,
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay.
No, thank you.
Maureen?
Goes to show why this has been talked about.
Over and
for so
over
many
again?
years.
Yes.
It's just, it's a really tough thing to.
Yeah. Okay. I do think it's important, as Mary said, that we do need to do something with the athletics. So I can't think of any other area where we have salaries outside of our operating budget. Linda, is there any other for things that we provide for the students. Are there any other salaries that are not in our budget?
No.
Okay.
I thought you said the one for Chef Paul was self-supporting or similar to the athletic
They're
budget.
still our employees and paid for out of our employee budget,
I
no?
guess In a sense, you're right, Nancy. Bridges staff is paid for out of the revenues collected for Bridges. So
Okay.
that's, an after-school program. Community ed staff is paid for out of the revenues created by community ed.
Okay.
Same thing with Chef Paul. Chef Paul's staff is paid for out of the revenues of that food service. That is not,
Okay.
the taxes aren't paying
Got it.
those salaries.
Okay, all right.
I think drama too, we have choreographers that are paid, and we have
Yeah,
the
that's true.
vocal
Yeah.
people
Okay.
that pay.
Okay.
So there are
Some areas, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I personally think that the athletics is, for me, it's a priority. That we have families out there having to sometimes make a choice between athletics or not, given that the cost of it. I think it makes it, it goes back to fix a problem that got instituted when the state cut funding. So you could make that argument across the board. Public education needs to provide a lot more than it currently does. But these people got together and made a well-thought-out presentation. And I do think spending $1,400 a year to have my kids play sports, and that's 2 of them, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. And I hate to have that, given how much it supports our vision statement and our mission for our schools, for people to have to fund that much. So if there was a way to reduce the athletics, that I think would be, for me, the priority. I hear what you're saying about transportation, but I also think of it as a service. When that bus comes down the road and my kids get on it, not everyone needs it. I choose to take advantage of it. But I can certainly support and ask, but it wouldn't be my priority. For me personally, the priority would be to reduce the athletic fees. It's still overall, the ask for the bus is less for people overall, the full-time. It's just, I disagree with you, that's all. So.
That's fine.
But if there was a way perhaps to add this as a second ask, then I could fully support that, knowing that the athletics would take priority. I'm not really ready to go down the path of kindergarten yet. Again, that's a one-time hit with your kid. I think we recognize it's an option for people to stay all day, and if cost really is an issue, then there is that half-day option. I also think coming down the pike will be a mandated full-day kindergarten program in the not-too-distant future. So that'll be, the town's gonna have to figure out how to pay for full-day kindergarten, no matter what we do at some point. But, so, that's where I'm at on all those.
Can I
Yeah.
make 2 additional comments?
Yeah.
I was looking at this athletic as putting the salaries and stipends into the operating budget, which I also think is very reasonable to do. With regard to going to a full cut, which I don't think we're looking at here, but I just want to share with you a comment that a parent made to me recently about going to a full cut of any kind of fee for athletic use, and that was that what he was bringing to my attention is that some students are trying out for teams and evidently being cut from the teams, so they don't have an opportunity to play the sport. So he was sort of raising a question, like, if we were to eliminate the athletic fees entirely, that burden would go back to the taxpayer, and we'd all be sharing the cost of paying for the program. But yet, some students, and also looking at the vision statement about individual students, where you have some interest there by individual students without being given the opportunity to to participate. So I just wanted to
Wait,
mention.
so they're
that.
being cut because of ability or cut because of limited funding for the team, or I don't understand why they're being cut.
I'm not sure I can answer that either, but
Okay.
he was saying, I think it was because of the size of the team.
Okay.
Like the team
There are
can,
tryouts, I think, for.
There were
for larger
tryouts.
Sports now, for
Yeah.
basketball teams and
Yeah.
things like that. So
there were
that's
tryouts, and not
size.
everybody who came to the tryout was said that they could participate in the team.
Okay.
In his experience, his children were not, selected
Okay.
to play on the team.
Got it.
So it's just something to consider how you respond to that, issue for a family that, if we went to eliminating the user fee, which again, I don't think that's the proposal right here, right now, but I wanted to share that with you.
Okay.
And then as far as the buses, I'm wondering whether we could get some additional feedback from families to find out how many families feel affected by this. How many would be looking at, how difficult is it for how many families to get their children to school? Because I agree with you both. I don't think it's reasonable to expect any child to walk on any of our streets to school. And I do think that it had to do with the sidewalks. For the towns that have the sidewalks in,
And the crossing guards.
that might be reasonable in a different situation than what we have here in Harvard. But is this an issue for many families that it is difficult for them to get the child to school or to pay to put them on the bus? I mean, we have heard from the parent community in terms of the athletics, at least a portion of them who took the time to put together this information and kind of survey how many students and individuals they think are affected by the athletic user fees. Maybe we could get some information on the bus. I don't know how quickly we could do it. We need to vote on this by the 14th, but
We did get numbers of ridership, didn't we?
I have ridership numbers, yeah.
And how many pay?
Yeah. Did I grab that?
Collected
piece of
that.
paper?
I think there was a survey about it, about if you don't ride the bus. Like, one of the questions was, if you don't ride the bus, why is that? Like, is it because of the user fee? Is it because of the amount of time your child would spend on the bus?
that's the kind of
That's
feedback
another
I
thing
think
to
would
do.
be useful.
It wasn't, I mean, not when I was on the committee, but I think
On,
Took
at
that kind
both
of a
schools,
survey.
or was it just HES? We were gonna do an informal one at HES
We were
for
going
some
to.
reason, and I don't remember why.
I mean, it could be that we have a lot of parents who would still drive their children for other reasons, or it could be that
they're
there are a
on their
lot
way to
of
work.
families that are conflicted with this, and that would be, I think that would be good too.
The problem is we can't collect that information in time to,
You could do a monkey survey, I mean, you could just throw it out there. They're pretty simple 5 questions. You could, you could.
okay.
No? You don't think so? You have a week to fill out the transportation survey, and I don't know what response rate you'd get, but
I think that's fast to try to collect, do well-thought questions and analyze data and get it out there and get responses in 1 week. I think that's,
And how would
Tough.
the,
3 weeks.
and how would the answers ultimately change how people feel?
If there's not a huge demand for reducing the bus fee, then I think we have to be responsible for what we're asking the taxpayers of the town to provide.
Well, no, that wasn't what I meant.
Okay.
What I meant is, like, if it's the, like, specific questions around why do you not use the bus, why, all of those questions, how does that affect how you feel about people, having to pay to use the bus? I mean, those questions, will it change your viewpoint? For me.
Oh, you mean around the table? here?
Yes,
Oh,
for
okay.
me, it wouldn't change my viewpoint, just the whole concept and philosophy around families having to pay for their children to get on a bus to go to school. For me, those answers wouldn't change my idea. So I just want to make sure, if that was something that we did decide to do, we want to be clear that the answers or potential answers would better inform your decision, that it would change your decision anyway. For me, it wouldn't.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I
Right.
made that clear.
well, and just to inform this discussion, if we put both asks forward, the 124 plus the 60, if they approved both of them, our budget would go up 4.1%. So that's just,
Right.
But we also would be providing some additional services that would be beyond the services that we provided last year. So it really puts us in a different category, and it should give us different consideration from the Finance Committee. They should agree that they're going to entertain us putting forth some budget items that are going to go beyond what we've provided in the past, and understand that there would be some additional cost to that. So. I think
that's
that
above
is-
level service, yeah.
Right.
That's why they're
Right.
additional, yep.
That's right. But to get back to your question, Kirsten, to me, I think it would help me to understand, I understand what you're saying about just deciding yourself the sort of the equitable, nature of providing the bus, but it would also, I think, be informative to know that this is an issue to a lot of people, or people are still going to drive their child even if the bus is free. I think it would be helpful to have more information, just to try to understand how many of our families are affected by this issue. Because if it's a lot more families, then that is informative and important to the decision, I think. If it's not, then I think the question is, if we need to prioritize, there's only a certain amount of money, and we need to prioritize, and we know we have another issue that affects a lot more of our students, then, maybe that, this time around, needs to get more priority, if it affects more of the students.
And another thing too, just to point out, is that we charge these fees, but we don't necessarily have any means, and I'm not suggesting that we do, of enforcing that those who ride the bus are actually paying the fees. And that,
We do it, I think K through 6, or K through 5. The kids aren't allowed to get on the bus unless they're actually signed up for the bus. K through 5. Now they're pretty stringent about it. I mean, you have to sign up and do a waiver if you're going to even be on a different
but
bus
K
now.
through 5 doesn't pay, do they?
Anyone living within 2 miles pays.
Like, I'm farther than 2 miles, so. I mean, I'm
You're-
within the 2 miles, so I paid for all
Okay,
my kids.
got it. Yeah, because, okay. I just want to, just, okay.
I'm not sure. So you're saying that you think that people are riding the bus at Bromfield that haven't
I
paid?
know
for
they
it?
are. I know they are. And I'm not suggesting that anything is done about that, but I'm just saying that if you have this arrangement, then it puts an onus that there's fairness and equity. And I'm not suggesting that, someone needs to be at the front of the bus, whatever. But I know for a fact that the bus is there for the convenience of whoever, whether you pay or not.
Okay.
Go home, that would be, not to get there.
If you happen to be at the same bus stop, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know if she would let someone on that hadn't paid. I think they know, because how would they know where to stop the bus?
They have a roster of kids that they're supposed to be accepting on.
Okay,
That roster comes from payment.
It
Whether
per-
there are some times that kids get on, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens.
It perhaps will depend somewhat on the bus driver and how familiar they are with the children in the
Well, I don't
route.
want, I don't want the bus police to come out, but I just,
It's true, it's a
I'm
tough
just
thing to
saying-
manage. I would agree with that. There's some, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the same as, kindergarten fee. If you haven't paid, it's clear it hasn't been paid, and then Lorraine gets involved and.
Right. Well, and you certainly have people who pay for the bus and don't use the bus. I mean, you have the wide gamut of bus usage and payments, so it goes both ways kind of thing.
yeah, but if you pay for it, you don't use it, that's fine. That's your
Mhm.
choice.
Mhm.
But if you're paying for it for the convenience of whomever, that just feels different.
Mhm. Yeah, it is harder to
Mhm.
keep track of.
So would it make sense, I mean, Nancy, would you be willing to take on maybe drafting questions with Linda and see if we can get
Sure.
something out there and see if it provides any useful data for our,
Sure.
okay,
Yeah, be happy to.
that'd be great.
And there's 3 weeks until our next meeting,
Right,
which
'cause
gives
it's
us
the
more time.
second
Okay.
Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, great. Anything else regarding the user fee discussion?
So is the, is there any room for proposing, and it might be after maybe you do, your work, but is this an all or nothing thing as far as like when I look at the 124 for athletics, and the 15 that, you did, or the 60 or whatever? Is there a place where we can talk about
You
a
would-
combination of?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take this and look at it and come up with a proposal, that's fine. It won't match what the Harvard Athletic Advisory Committee is requesting. And I think it needs to have some rationale, but you're more than welcome to take a look at it and come up with numbers and let us know. what
Yeah,
you
I mean,
think.
any of us, just as part of our conversation at the table, maybe after Nancy finds out more information. People might,
Right, I mean, this all started because the athletic advisory put the
Right.
time and money and effort into coming up with their numbers. So if transportation is important to you, then please, just take a look at it and come up with a recommendation.
well, it's something that's come up over and over again at this table.
Yeah.
And it keeps sort of, to have a committee about transportation, it just seems so, what's there to talk about? It's $60,000 that people are paying. I mean, we could have a committee, I guess, to discuss that, but it just seems like,
Right, no, I'm just saying that I did this because nobody else really took on the two other areas. So I'm more than happy, and I think the committee is more than happy to entertain other scenarios, absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Tricky part is the time constraint. The book and moving it on to FinCom
No, it needs
is the
to get-
15th of December.
Right, no, it needs to, we have a drop dead date of the meeting on the 14th.
Yeah,
14th.
yeah, and I understand that. It's just that the transportation thing has come to this table many times, and we keep pushing it away. And what's being brought up is that, this group from the athletics, came together and they put forth all this work, and we definitely want to, honor that work and have discussions. But I don't think that it preempts the fact that this bus thing has come up year after year.
Well, I don't remember Kirsten actually having a conversation about the bus fee.
That's right, you're right, because it's come up, and then we've said we're gonna talk about it as part of the user fees, and then it ends up being sort of an add-on.
Okay, got it.
So,
I think, though, that because the athletics is at sort of a really crucial junction, but the transportation isn't. Like, if we don't do something for the athletic fees and the program, we're in danger of creating a deficit year after year after year.
Yeah.
And then, what do we do with that? Whereas,
Mhm.
transportation people are paying and the buses are running. And so right now, it doesn't seem like that's in crisis. Whereas this kind of is going down that road, athletics is. So that, I
But,
think
yeah.
that's sort of, I think that's the idea that we need to step in and figure something out for athletics. And we don't hear that about the transportation fees.
And also, if you look at how we compare to other towns, athletics is higher, and the bus fee is fairly well slotted within town. So I'm just saying what's driving, I think, the athletics is the immediate need and the onus, and I think as Mary's right, I do think we're gonna run a little bit of a deficit of bus fees this year, because the offset's 55 or 60 this year, and we only collected 48, I think. So we may have an immediate short gap just
She
for
didn't
this
tell
year.
us what was in the revolving account, though, did she?
No, she said it was very little, but she told me that we had only collected year-to-date $48,000 or $49,000 for the bus fees, so that's gonna fall short of our deficit anyway, so you'd have to either raise them or do something there, but right now, the the $20,000 hit would be in the athletics, so.
But to Mary's point, the 124 being asked for, there's a big difference between 22 and 124. And that if we were to not raise it and keep things the same, and I'm not suggesting that's what we do, but if we did that, we would not be
We
in
need to add
danger for this
11,000
year.
every year, probably.
If it's decreasing, we'd have to add continually.
But I'm just saying, for this year, based on what Linda said,
22,000.
there's 22.
Yep.
That clearly, we're not going to rate, I would hope, we wouldn't raise user fees. So at the very least,
No.
I would think that we would be dedicated to putting 22,000 additional money in. I'm not suggesting that's all we should do, but there is a big difference between that and the 124. So, you know, and the bus fees, you're right, it's not, people aren't banging down the door about the bus fees. For me, it's just it's a philosophical thing.
I do think also, if, when April rolls around and we choose to not fill the 5 slots of choice, we have another 25,000 somehow needs to get taken into account. So we haven't really had that discussion yet either. We simply said we could accommodate 5, we'll budget for 5, but we may not end up with 5. So there will be demand, there's always demands on the money, so it's a function of how much can we ask and how much can we really bear as our taxpayers, and how much can the families bear, so it's a balance.
Right, so we're asking for athletics, and we have to ask ourselves that same question.
Right. Right. And who knows, they may not approve it, and then, or they may approve it in the form of an ask and an override, and that may fail. So we have to actually have Plan B. If it doesn't get accepted, how are we going to cover the 20,000? So. Okay, so what I'm hearing is we're going to do a bus survey as quickly as, or transportation survey.
Okay.
You and Linda can work on the questions for that and see what we can get back in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. And you're going to perhaps come up with a different model of suggesting on fees or not. That's up to you.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, great.
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, great. And we'll bring Jennifer up to speed.
I mean, we've got, we have a bunch of athletic monetary information, like what the coaches make. We could give that to Kirsten.
It's
in the
right
budget
Put
book.
it in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, great. All right, so barring any further discussion on that, I think we're ready to report out on liaisons. So, since I always go to the left first, I'm going over this way.
Okay, it'll be quick and easy, because
Right.
we have not met.
Okay.
So we're coming up with, we only meet once a month, I think. So
Okay.
it'll be coming up in the next week or so.
Right.
But I'm sorry, no report. We have not met with Brompton School Council.
All right, cool. All right, let's see, so, Capital Planning Investment Committee met this morning. We are doing our follow-up questions for the schools on next Monday night, and the HEAC will be presenting also, so Brian will be there next Monday night, to go over his requests, even though they're a year out, to give the capital another opportunity. They did request that we give them the technology ask once we have that finalized, so that it can just be informed by that. It's not really an approval, but an inform. We had the master plan steering committee presentation on Devon's. You were there. There were quite a few, I would say probably 10 or so, maybe Devon's residents there also. And about, I don't remember people, about 70 people, I think, were there. We were adding chairs at the end. So, and it was just a great hour-and-a-half presentation by our consultant, going over from a master plan point of view, the different elements of the plan, how resuming jurisdiction of Devon's would impact it or not, if we didn't. And I thought the discussion at the end was great. It really I think someone said, it's a little disconcerting because you're talking about my neighborhood and I'm not dead yet kind of thing. Like, you're picking at my bones and I'm not dead yet, I think was the quote in the press. But I think people actually now register that it's 2033 is not that far away. And the conversation needs to get started with Ayer and Shirley about how we're going to present a recommendation to the legislature, because ultimately it's the legislature that will vote on it. And it would be really great if there was an agreement between the three towns as to what we're recommending. And it started the conversation, I think, at a level that really needs to happen between here on out. So that was really great. And that's it. I think everything else got covered.
We had elections in Devon's last week. We had two of 4 Devon's slots on the DAC up for election, including myself, and I neglected to get my nomination paper in, so we actually had no candidates for the 2 seats, but with 17 and 18 write-in votes, I think Deb Rivera, who has worked in kindergarten for years,
okay.
And myself were elected to the DAC.
Fabulous. Phew. That wasn't a Freudian slip on your part, was it?
No.
Okay.
Mass development was, they were kind of like, whoa. I guess that trust asked the people in the office if that had ever happened before. So, anyway.
Great. Oh, welcome aboard again.
Congratulations, yes.
Thanks. Mary?
I have not really heard anything much from Parks and Rec or HEAC, although now I'll be in touch with Brian.
Okay.
And what are my other things?
Policy.
Policy, Jennifer and I have not met, so we need to do that.
Okay.
Because now I've written policy down for a few different things.
You've
Well, we
got
have
things
to
do
now about the cameras.
Yeah, so, we'll set something up.
Yeah.
ASAP.
Okay, good.
And athletic advisory, we've kind of talked about a lot of the things that we met last Tuesday.
Mhm.
And just sort of
Yeah,
kind of waiting.
right.
I think that, they're very hopeful, and they're willing also to come to a FinCom meeting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To have some representation from them,
Great.
which we said, yes, that would be good.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Kristen?
All set?
Okay, give us our big HCTV update.
Well,
Where are we standing with the calendar and the calendar committee?
Oh, yeah, I went to that meeting too.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
But
did.
that's not, is that technically, I guess that is.
It's Linda's committee, but
Yeah.
it's a liaison report out, so.
Um,
Don't take it or?
I know I'm gonna not remember everything, but I think we had a pretty big discussion on HES and conferences, and, all about kind of reporting out.
Thanks, Steve.
Too late. Like, people are, like, November is kind of, maybe a little late to the first time that you're meeting with your kids' teacher. So we talked about a different model of meeting earlier, but it's a different structured conference, and that it'd be more of a conversation about the child between the parent and the teacher, not how the child is doing, because if this conversation happens earlier, it would be sort of early October, so really beginning of school, whereas the parent could be helping the teacher understand how they think their child is what kind of learner their child is. And not so much teacher having to have all these things ready to present to the parent. I'm not sure where we're going with that. I think Sue is in favor of at least talking to the teachers about this, where it wouldn't, it also would not then maybe be the curriculum night. This would be sort of in place of that. So it's kind of a big, a discussion wasn't meant to be that way, but it went that way. And there was a lot of good back and forth about how it could be a really great meeting between teacher and parent for the first time early on in the school year.
The logistics are that for Brownfield, it works best for them to be when they are.
Right,
And for elementary, it works best for them to be moved,
okay.
perhaps. So we were talking about how you could still run buses and have the shorter days in October for the elementary and.
Oh, swap the
um,
buses.
Right, and swap the buses. So the only difficulty for families would be in child care that's provided by older siblings.
Right.
Because there'd be days when the younger ones were home early. But we thought it was worth a pilot. And really, if it was about the relationship building between the parents and the teacher, perhaps that was still a better model than shoehorning one to fit the other, you know.
Just to have the same days.
Right, because really Bromfield families have gotten at least 2 reports by this time.
Yeah.
And elementary has received nothing until this time. So it's, you know, one of the other thoughts is.
But you're not talking about impacting the report card timing.
Not at this point. What they talked about, I mean, they know that is one of the school improvement plan
Okay.
goals, is to talk about additional reporting
Yeah.
to parents. But perhaps that would be the November time, when normally that's the conference
Got it.
time. So
Okay.
there's ways that could fit in. Other than that, there could be,
The break?
the breaks are really sliding back to what is currently done.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we're feeling that, you know, nobody else, no
State
other
support.
districts are doing it around us, and
Leading in that,
it's.
Direction may not
It's really
be-
difficult
Yeah.
to try and get behind that if no other schools are doing it either.
Right. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so far that's,
the only change is really about considering the conference change. We talked about
PD.
ERs maybe being
ERs.
mornings versus afternoons, and there were some thoughts that that wouldn't work as well. One of the reasons was, currently, if a team of teachers gets into something and it's in the afternoon, they can continue working up past their time.
Right.
If it was a hard stop because students were coming,
That would.
that continuation of the topic couldn't happen,
Right.
which does make quite a bit of sense.
Okay.
So that was part of it.
Okay.
Can I comment on calendar?
Sure.
The HES, I mean, that sounds fine to me, whatever the school decides on the October parent-teacher meetings, but my question would be, when then do the parents get their first information that they would have gotten in November? In other words, first sort of evaluative kinds of comments regarding the student, and if it's the report card, there's been some comment that the report cards are not providing a lot of information back to the parents regarding the student's progress. We have a numbering system which has 4 numbers, 5 numbers. And the parents are just getting a number for each of the line items. Years ago, they used to get some pretty detailed written comments. And those were not part of the reports last year. I don't know if they're coming back, but, I mean, if there were some written comments that sort of describe how the student is doing in the learning environment, that I think could replace that November conference. But if not, and you're still just going to give that current report card with the numbers on it, then when are the parents going to get more than that? Is it going to be all the way into February when they have an opportunity for the second conference? That'd be my only comment on that, is that it sounds like a good idea to meet early and get that relationship started, but when are they going to get more evaluation of the students' work in progress? And is it going to be more than just that report card with the numbers?
I think they're 2 different topics being handled by 2 very different groups.
Yeah.
We're tasked with calendar.
Right.
School improvement plan is tasked with the school council to talk about the evaluation, how often that happens. I get they're tied as a parent, but
Yeah, they're different.
they are tasked by different people for different reasons, and
Well, it's
I think
also
they have to play out through their.
respective channels. Because
Respective
it's, we do approve the calendar, but we don't get to say how the reporting goes. That's really the administration, but I think we're
We
just
get them
providing,
linked, yeah.
we're providing some feedback, I think.
Just a comment back to the
Yeah.
group to consider when the parents are going to receive
Yeah.
the evaluation.
Well, I think, I mean, our,
Progress, in other words.
sorry, our main task is to figure out half-days, ERs, when the PD days are happening. So that's why that came up, is that, maybe not having HES and Brownfield doing their conferences at the same time. So, it does bring up a different issue, but I'm not sure where the calendar committee is talking about that.
They aren't.
But,
But the
Nancy brings a good
administration
point.
behind it has that understanding that they're linked.
So, so your point really is, when do parents get a written report?
Either
If
written
not-
or in person, but something that would evaluate the student's progress, other than just receiving the November report, which is giving you some numbers that are fairly general and
You'd still
not
not
all
want
that,
to go in and talk
not
to
all
the
that-
teacher about, right?
all that easy to interpret for some families. My child got a 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, what does that
Especially
mean?
there's letters too.
It
Isn't
doesn't,
there 2A and 2B? Like, there's A and B in there as well.
There can be, yes.
No, there is.
We used to be in Habits of Mind, there was a 2A or something, right? I don't know that there's a 2 anymore in the meeting the standards.
There is a 2
I
in
mean,
meeting
a
standards. You're
2B.
below grade level, yeah.
A 2A or 2B.
I don't think so.
I think there was, at one point, there was something, but
Yeah.
whatever. So I think you got 2 separate issues, and,
Which are kind of, in a way, they're connected
well, they may,
in that discussion.
well, because
But I
you're
think the
eliminating,
administration has to
because you're
handle-
eliminating the conference that would provide the evaluation of the
Right.
student, is I think what you were saying. You're going to eliminate that, and you're going to substitute a meeting
But-
in October that's going to be,
There'll be some progress information at that
I
time.
think there would be, in November, there was, at the end, this time, there would be something, but our discussion didn't get that far.
I think you're going to need a recommendation from the administration, which will then feed into the calendar, because you do have to take that into consideration, that aspect of it. You guys have to kind of go lock and step, whatever that kind of
Mhm.
thinking is.
and if I may, I'd just like to share really quickly with you that I have some difficulty with the calendar in terms of the policy on the religious holidays. And I just want to share with everybody ahead of time before we're asked for a vote on this, because to me, the policy was changed to eliminate religious holidays and only give holidays that are also federal holidays. But yet, we're looking at a calendar that is providing the December 24th off as a day off. And it's being linked to the fact that it was a low attendance day, but it's very hard for me personally to separate the fact that it's low attendance because it's a religious holiday. So it's an issue that, to me, giving that day off as part of the calendar is not consistent with the policy that we have.
Well, it'll be a weekend on the calendar that we're voting on this year. The 24th is a
I thought it
weekend.
was a Thursday.
No.
No, this year's already set. Like, this year's calendar was voted on last year.
Yeah, so the one you're approving for next year, the holiday
Right.
falls on a weekend. I mean, the 24th is a weekend. It's a Saturday, and Sunday is the 25th.
Okay.
So that year, you're going to be,
It'll
it will not.
eliminate it. So I will bring this up a year from now then.
Yes. Then it will probably.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's a Saturday in 2016.
It is.
And the next year would be a
Sunday.
Sunday.
And then next
2
year, then
years.
it's a Sunday, so you're good to go for 2 years.
That may be the end of my term, so we
Still be
may
involved.
never have that issue then.
All right, future agenda items. I've got the budget with the user fees that needs to come back. I'm thinking that policy might be on there,
Yeah.
okay? Science labs, hopefully, but that could be in your superintendent's report, maybe.
Sure. Mhm.
The trip approval again.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
What happened to that little Maddie Bryce? Get trip approval. I'm just looking at the standard calendar. PD.
Oh, we didn't
What?
vote to accept those grants
Oh.
tonight.
Do you need it, or can you, does it prevent the funding from happening?
Well, we can, right?
We can do it.
We're not adjourned.
Okay,
If we could do
so.
it, that would be easier. Sorry about
Under the
that.
superintendent's report, there were 2 gifts outlined by the Harvard Schools Trust. Anybody need the paperwork again, or?
The letter is in your packet.
Who has it up in front of them?
I almost do.
Motion to approve the Harvard Schools Trust grants as presented in your packet, which is
Here it is.
$1,500 for the visitor on climate change and $3,150 for a Civil War living history event.
So moved?
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
They are approved for the requisite letter of thanks to the Harvard Schools Trust. Okay, so back to agenda items for the December 14th meeting. It's our only meeting in December.
I'm
Oh, a
just-
calendar update.
If you're
Did
ready.
you already say the MOU each?
Yeah, if you're ready to bring that back.
It will depend on their
Okay,
meeting schedule, but
so we'll check with you a week
Yeah,
before and see if
sounds
that's
good.
ready. Okay. Okay, we got that. Got that. I don't have anything else down for a standard December item. So, anything else, Linda, that you see?
Nope.
Okay.
Should we have a student?
We did, in the last agenda,
Yeah.
from the minutes, we didn't bring forward science labs from their mass development, Thatcher Keyser. Is that,
That was like a future.
Oh, to invite them to a future meeting, yeah.
okay. Student presentation,
Yeah. Mary just.
Brown Fieldhouse, but I think that.
That is waiting, so on the capital plan, it's still out there. Kindergarten, actually, the kindergarten wing takes precedence at this point over any other
Okay.
town big initiative, which is great to hear. And until Ron Ritchie hears back on the costs of this building, and I have a appraisal done of the Brown Fieldhouse, there really isn't anything yet to do on that, but it's definitely coming back, and at some point, it will come back.
Okay, of course it will.
We will need to address our support or not for the inclusion of this. If the Board of Selectmen are behind it, then we need to decide whether we support the Historical Commission's desire to move it into the Historical District. But that's further down the line also.
Okay.
Thanks. Anything else? All right, close. I don't think they're still interested citizens, are they? No, they're disinterested citizens.
2 hours ago.
All right, school committee closing commentary. Chris, anything for you?
all set.
Great, Mary?
All set.
I do. I have to say I'm thankful for all the hard work that everybody does and everybody in the schools. Honestly, I had my conference today. You know, our kids are going to school. Most of them, they're happy. They're in a safe place. They're fed wonderful food. You know, they got these caring teachers, so I'm thankful for that for sure.
Thank you. Seconded that.
Yeah, third to that, actually. And just really a shout out to the all the people who put the Little Mermaid production together at HES, and Kate Hoke, who does the Superstar productions. That was phenomenal, and people put hours and hours into that. And then a plug for Les Mis at Bromfield happening on December 4th, 5th, and 6th. So Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon. There's 50 some odd kids involved in the production. It's the biggest production I think they've done, at least that I know of. So plug for that. And really, I was at the schools today, and our teachers are amazing, and their care and commitment to our kids is just really heartwarming. So, and thank you for everybody for everything that you do. It's a thankless job. Being on school committee, no one knows what you do. No one will ever be able to appreciate what you do to the degree that you do it. But thank you. I thank you for being my partners in having this work and having the schools be extraordinary. Thank you.
I just add the thank you for the PTO and the Bromfield Appreciation Dinner. It was very, very lovely dinner that they did, and I'm sure at HES also. I wasn't over to see what they were doing, but a lot of individuals involved with that as well. A lot of families showing their appreciation for all of their teachers by making one of their favorite dishes and sharing it, so it's a great event.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank
All right.
you.
If there are no objections, I'll consider the meeting adjourned. Great. We are adjourned.